What if everything you thought you knew about history was wrong? From mysterious ancient machines to perfectly preserved human sacrifices, these shocking archaeological discoveries have left scientists baffled and rewritten entire chapters of our past. Get ready to uncover the 15 most jaw-dropping finds that challenge everything we know about human civilization. Start with number 1, about the Antikythera mechanism. Ancient Greek computer. In 1901, Greek sponge divers stumbled across a large lump of what they thought was lead just off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera. When they brought it up to the surface, they found that it was actually a bronze shipwreck. The divers were working for a French archaeologist named Valéry Stenard, who was excavating the seabed around the island. He had already found several statues and other artifacts, but he wasn't prepared for what he would find next. As he cleared away the silt and seaweed, he realized that the massive lump was actually a bronze box filled with dozens of even smaller boxes, each filled with gears, wheels, and shafts. There were hundreds of pieces in all. When he put them together, he found that they formed a complex piece of machinery with dials, pointers, and inscriptions. It looked like a bizarre combination of a clock, a calendar, and a compass. But it was nothing like any artifact that had ever been discovered in the ancient world. To this day, scholars don't know exactly what it is or how it worked, but it's widely believed to be the world's first analog computer. The device has become known as the Antikythera mechanism after the island where it was found. And it dates back to the 2nd or 1st century BC. That means it's at least 2,000 years old. What makes the mechanism so remarkable is its sheer complexity. It rivals the most intricate clockwork ever made in the 18th century. But the crazy thing is that it was built by the ancient Greeks, whose technology was thousands of years ahead of our own. Back then, people didn't have electric motors or microchips, so every gear and wheel had to be crafted by hand. There are 30 such components inside the Antikythera mechanism. And because it's an analog machine, the parts had to fit together with incredible precision. The gears had to mesh perfectly, or the entire device would fall apart. Not to mention that it's completely mechanical. There's no hydraulics or pneumatics involved. This means that there are no moving parts powered by water or air. Everything is driven by the motion of the wheels and gears themselves. It's not exactly clear how the Antikythera mechanism was powered. Perhaps a hand crank, or perhaps it was wound up like a spring. Some researchers believe that it may have even been powered by water. You see, there is a hole near the top of the device that may have been used to fill it with water. The water would then flow through the mechanism, turning the gears and driving the device. Of course, this is pure speculation. We really don't know how the Antikythera mechanism worked. What we do know is that it was incredibly advanced for its time. It was probably used to predict celestial events like eclipses, the phases of the moon, and the positions of the planets. The device has 365 teeth on one of its wheels, which corresponds to the number of days in a year. Another wheel has 27 divisions, which represents the number of days in the cycle of the moon. The third wheel has 19 years inscribed on it, which may have been used to track the cycle of the stars. The mechanism also has 2 dials, one with the signs of the zodiac and another with the months of the year. There are also pointers for the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets known to the Greeks. Some researchers believe that the Antikythera mechanism was used by astronomers to predict the future. Others think it was used as a teaching tool to explain the complexities of the cosmos. But nobody knows for sure. The truth is that the ancient Greeks were incredibly advanced for their time. They developed many inventions that we're only just rediscovering today. Things like the odometer, the alarm clock, and the hydraulic organ all came from ancient Greece. The Antikythera mechanism is just one example of their ingenuity. It's amazing to think that something so complex could have been built so long ago. It's even more amazing that it survived for 2,000 years before being discovered by modern man. The Antikythera mechanism is currently on display at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. If you ever get the chance to visit, I highly recommend it. It's truly one of the most fascinating artifacts ever discovered. So what do you think? What was the Antikythera mechanism used for? Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my others about ancient Greek technology. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Start with number 2. Did you know that there is a place on Earth where human history began? A place older than the Great Pyramid of Giza, older than Stonehenge, even older than the Roman Colosseum? Welcome to Göbekli Tepe. the world's oldest temple. It's located in southeastern Turkey, near the Syrian border, and was built during the late Pleistocene era, which means it's at least 11,000 years old. To put that in perspective, humans built this temple before the wheel, before the plow, before the domestication of animals. It was constructed during a time when people lived by hunting and gathering. But what makes Göbekli Tepe so special? What's so significant about this ancient site is that it completely rewrites the history of human civilization. For many years, historians believed that the development of society happened gradually. They thought that early humans first developed the ability to farm, then domesticated animals, then invented the wheel, and then eventually started building great works of art and architecture. However, the discovery of Göbekli Tepe suggests that these developments may have happened much later than we think. What's really amazing about this site is the megalithic pillars that are found all over the area. These pillars are absolutely massive and weigh several tons each. Archaeologists believe that these pillars were used for religious purposes, but we don't know exactly what kind of rituals took place here. We also don't know why the builders of Göbekli Tepe stopped building around 8000 BC. Some believe that they may have been wiped out by a natural disaster, while others believe that they simply moved away. What we do know is that Göbekli Tepe was built during a time when humans were just beginning to explore new technologies. The oldest tools found at the site date back to the Iranian culture, which flourished between 40,000 and 32,000 years ago. These early humans used a variety of different materials, including bone, ivory, wood, and stone. They also began to use more sophisticated weapons, such as spears and bows and arrows. This was also a time when humans began to produce cave paintings, some of which are still visible today in places like Lascaux, France, and Altamira, Spain. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has completely changed the way we think about early human civilization. It shows that humans were capable of building great works of architecture and engineering long before we developed agriculture or domesticated animals. It also shows that humans had a deep understanding of mathematics and astronomy. In fact, some archaeologists believe that Göbekli Tepe was used as an astronomical observatory. The pillars were used to track the movements of the stars and planets, and this knowledge was used to predict important events such as solstices and equinoxes. To be honest, there is still a lot that we don't know about Göbekli Tepe. The site is still being excavated, and new discoveries are being made all the time. But one thing is for sure. This ancient temple is one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. It's a place where we can literally see the foundations of human civilization. And if you want to learn more about ancient history, stay tuned for more updates. Thank you for watching. Start with number 3. These are the mysterious Nazca lines found in the deserts of Peru. Some say they were made as giant landing strips for spaceships, while others believe they're nothing more than ancient artwork. But what's really going on here? The Nazca lines are a collection of over 10,000 lines and designs etched into the surface of the Nazca Desert. The desert is located in southern Peru, about 400 miles south of Lima. The designs range in size from small geometric figures to human and animal figures that are hundreds of feet long. Because these designs are so massive, they can only be seen from the air. For centuries, the Nazca people had been creating these mysterious lines, but no one knows why. They first started making them around 500 years before the Incas even showed up in the area. The Incas didn't know who made them either. They came up with their own theories, just like we have today. But ultimately, these desert etchings have remained a mystery. There are a few things that we do know. For example, we know that the Nazca people used a simple tool to make these markings. It was basically a wooden stick with a sharp rock tied to one end. This would have allowed them to make lines miles long and several feet wide. The Nazca also chose their ground markings carefully. Each design was made in a slightly different location, but all of them were made on flat, open stretches of desert. This would have made it easier for the Nazca to see the designs from a distance. Another thing that we know is that the Nazca people did not use any wheeled vehicles. Didn't invent the wheel until very late in their civilization. So if they wanted to get somewhere fast, they walked. Because of this, archaeologists believe that the Nazca probably made the lines for ritualistic purposes. Perhaps they would walk to the center of a design and perform some sort of ceremony. But there's absolutely no proof of this, and it's just speculation. It's also possible that the Nazca line served as a map of the constellations. There are some designs that look an awful lot like certain stars and star clusters. What's more, Some of the lines seem to point towards significant astronomical events, like solstices and equinoxes. Again, though, this is just a theory. We don't have any evidence that the Nazca ever used their lines for astronomy, but these lines are far too big to be anything other than a map or a ritualistic ground. So what else could they be? A popular theory among conspiracy theorists is that the lines were made as landing strips for extraterrestrials. As you may have heard, the famous astronaut Neil Armstrong said that the Nazca lines were the only man-made structure visible from the moon. This isn't actually true, and you can see many man-made structures from the moon, including the Great Wall of China and even some highways. But that doesn't change the fact that the Nazca lines are pretty eye-catching from low Earth orbit. Some designs are so large that they aren't even fully visible in Google Earth. You have to actually fly over them to see the full scope of the geoglyphs. So how did these astronauts know about the Nazca lines? Well, in the 1970s, NASA began sharing astronaut photographs of the Earth with the public. This included pictures of the Nazca lines. Before this, nobody outside of Peru even knew that these lines existed. But once they were shown to the world, everyone began coming up with all sorts of theories as to how they got there. One of the main reasons that people believe the Nazca lines are alien landing strips is that nobody knows for sure what they were used for. We have no written records or artifacts explaining the lines. So people have gotten creative with their guesses. Another reason is that the Nazca lines are incredibly well preserved. So most of them are still intact, unlike many other ancient sites. Some say this is because aliens returned to use their landing strips, and this kept the formations in good condition. But this is obviously just a fun theory with absolutely no basis in reality. Thanks for watching. Do you think the Nazca lines were used as landing strips for alien spaceships? Or do you think they're another explanation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Start with number 4. Mummies are supposed to be dead, right? Well, several Egyptian mummies were found with horrific facial expressions, including what some have called the most painful scream ever caught in stone. But why would an ancient person be immortalized with such a terrified expression? Was it pain, poison, or something much darker? Join us as we look at some of the scariest mummies ever found, and what their contorted faces might be trying to tell us. We've all seen mummies that have been preserved in a sitting position. You know, the ones where they basically sitting there ready to be shipped off, wherever it is mummies go when they not busy being in museums. But this one, found in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, was found in a fetal position, which means that scientists don't think he was sitting down when he died. They think he was screaming in agony. The mummy in question is known as the Screaming Mummy, which is obviously quite appropriate given that we're talking about this particular mummy. And given that he's in the fetal position, it seems like he was trying to protect himself from whatever it was that caused his untimely demise. The reason for this is that the fetal position reduces the surface area of the body exposed to any potential threats. So our ancestors knew exactly what to do in order to survive. Maybe if more people knew this, the world would be a better place. But back to the mummy, because there are other reasons why he could have been in this position. According to National Geographic, the walls of the coffin were too narrow for him to be in any other position. This is out of the realm of possibility. Because ancient Egyptians believed that the pharaohs would come back after they died, which is likely why they made the coffins so small. It would also explain why the mummy was shoved in there like that. It's important to note that even though he was found in a fetal position, scientists don't believe that he was actually a baby. Instead, they think that whoever was in the coffin was an adult male who had been around 35 years old when he died. His remains were discovered in 1921 by a team of archaeologists led by Edward R. Ayrton, and were originally kept at Manchester Museum before being moved to the British Museum, where he's still kept today. Now, you're probably asking yourself, okay, great, but why is he screaming? Well, there's a few theories here. One is that the mummy was killed in battle and was put into the fetal position after the fact. However, there's no evidence that he had any wounds on his body, so this theory seems unlikely. Another is that he may have been executed by having his skull smashed open, which would definitely explain the terrifying facial expression. But once again, there's no physical evidence to support this claim. However, in 2020, scientists decided to take matters into their own hands and ran a few tests to see if they could find out why the mummy was preserved in such a strange way, using X-rays and computer tomography scans. They took a look inside the mummy and discovered that it had sustained injuries to its ribs and vertebrae. This could mean that he was in a lot of pain before his death, hence the reason for the fetal position. Unfortunately, they could undetermine what caused the injuries or whether or not he was still alive when he was mummified. And while it's tempting to assume that these injuries are what caused his death, it's equally possible that they happened after the fact. It's also important to mention that while some believe the facial expression is a scream, others say that it could just be a snarl. And while nobody wants to be snarling when they die, it's certainly less terrifying than screaming in agony. As time passes and technology improves, it's likely that we'll learn more about this mummy and the reason for his terrifying facial expression. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll find out that he was simply immortalized in the worst way possible, and that his face doesn't actually reveal anything about his death. If you want to know more about the dark side of ancient Egypt, check out what really happened in Tutankhamun's tomb, or watch this video instead. Start with number 5. We're going to talk about the London Hammer. Out-of-place artifact. This is an artifact that's completely out of place. It doesn't seem to belong to any point in history. So let's talk about it. So this hammer was found in 1936 by a rancher named George McKeever. He was out surveying his land with a metal detector when all of a sudden his device started going crazy. And he said that it was vibrating so much that it almost went flying out of his hands. So he decided to follow up on the signal, and he started digging in the dirt, and he uncovered this rock monolith. The rock monolith had a shiny metal object inside of it. So he removed the rock, and the object turned out to be a hammer. Now the interesting thing is that the hammer seems to be made of a modern alloy, but the rock in which it was embedded is estimated to be around 400 million years old. So how could a modern hammer be found embedded in rock that's that old? There are some who believe that this could be evidence of an advanced ancient civilization, because if people were living in North America 400 million years ago, then they could have used tools like a hammer. But there's no evidence of any kind of civilization at that time. In fact, the oldest fossils we have found in North America are only around 500 million years old. Something else must have been going on here. There are others who say that this hammer might have been left behind by a time traveler, and that's certainly possible. However, there are a few issues with that idea. First of all, we don't know if hammers were even invented 400 million years ago. You see, the earliest evidence for the use of hammers and anvils goes back to the Paleolithic age, and these were simple stone hammers. We know that by around 1500 BCE, the Egyptians were making more complex hammers out of bronze. But do we really want to believe that a time traveler from the distant future would be carrying around a simple hammer made out of a modern alloy? That just doesn't make any sense. So what could be the explanation for the London Hammer? Well, one possibility is that the hammer was simply dropped by someone who was working in the area. Maybe it was a construction worker or a surveyor. So after all, the area in which the hammer was found is not too far away from Houston. So maybe it was just dropped by someone who lived in the modern day. Another possibility is that the hammer became lodged in the rock after an explosion. Explosions can send objects flying through the air, and then they get stuck in rocks. Maybe something like that happened here. Of course, there are those who are going to say that the hammer is definitely evidence of an ancient civilization or time travel, but we really have to stick to reality when evaluating this artifact. The most likely explanation is that it was simply dropped in the area by someone in the modern day. If you really want to believe in time travel and all that stuff, that's fine. We have to look at the facts, and we have to choose the most logical explanation. And in this case, the most logical explanation is that it was just dropped there by accident. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and come back soon, because we have lots more videos on all kinds of mysterious artifacts coming up.
Start with number 6, the Voynich manuscript, an uncrackable code. And most of them turn out to be religious texts, state documents, or really just some combination of boring. But there is one mysterious text that has stumped experts for centuries. It's called the Voynich manuscript, and you might be able to tell just by looking at it that it's not like any book we've ever seen before. That's because its language and even its alphabet is completely unknown. And that's only the start of the mystery. It looks like a normal book, but it isn't bound in leather or any other animal skin. The cover is made entirely from a single piece of wood, and it was painted with what appears to be milk. The pages inside are made from some sort of plant material, and they're filled with strange illustrations alongside the bizarre text. There are pictures of people with strange markings on their bodies, and plants with multiple sets of leaves and roots growing out of them. Some pages show astronomical charts with 7 different celestial bodies scattered across a dark void. and others detail recipes with instructions written in the same indecipherable script used throughout the book. So who wrote this book, and why have they remained a secret for so long? That's where things get a little weirder, because it may have been hiding in plain sight for hundreds of years. The Voynich manuscript may have been created sometime in the 15th century. It got its name from the Polish bookseller who purchased it in 1912, but it could have been written in Italy around 1400, or it could be a modern fake, or maybe it's a hoax perpetrated by aliens. Yes, we said aliens. Let us explain. At first glance, it seems like the perfect unsolved mystery, an unknown text with an unknown origin written in an unknown language. But there are a few problems with that theory. First of all, someone had to have written the book. If we can't read it, that doesn't mean that the people who created it didn't know what they were writing. In fact, a lot of people have tried to decipher the Voynich manuscript, and several believe that they actually did crack the code, only to find that the text simply didn't make any sense. Take, for example, the work of American cryptographer William Friedman. He believed that he had finally solved the mystery in 1967. Not only was he able to determine that the alphabet consisted of 24 letters, but he was also able to translate a passage that read, "This is a summary of the properties of the universe contained in a single word." Unfortunately, when Friedman published his findings, other cryptographers pointed out that his translations didn't match up with the original text. Most of the time, when you substitute the letters of the alphabet, every word in the text should still look like it has 24 letters. But Friedman's substitutions turned some words into gibberish and others into nonsense words like ekmaru. So whatever code he cracked wasn't accurate. Even if that code was correct, it wouldn't necessarily mean that the book was a hoax. After all, it's possible that it contains real knowledge about the universe that we just don't understand yet. But there's no evidence that the people who lived in the 15th century had any advanced knowledge of astronomy or science. They did, however, have a pretty good understanding of how books work. And it seems unlikely that they would have gone to the trouble of creating a fake alphabet and writing out these elaborate diagrams if they weren't trying to hide something. But if it's not a hoax, why hasn't anyone been able to decode it? One of the reasons is that very few people have actually gotten their hands on it. The manuscript is extremely fragile, and it's incredibly rare for it to leave the vault at Yale's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where it's kept today. But researchers were recently able to use non-invasive imaging technology to take a closer look at the text without damaging the book itself. They discovered that the ink used to write the text contains traces of lead, which suggests that it may have been created using a metallographic printing process. That would certainly make it a forgery, but it would also push back its creation date to the early 1800s rather than the 15th century. Ultimately, it may come down to accepting that the Voynich manuscript is just that. A mysterious manuscript whose purpose we may never know. There's no need to invoke aliens or hidden messages from the future unless we've exhausted every other possible explanation. And when it comes to unexplainable phenomena, there's always going to be simpler explanations that we haven't thought of yet. So do you think the Voynich manuscript holds a secret that we're not ready to understand, or is it a clever forgery? Let us know in the comments below. And thanks for watching.
Start with number 7, the crystal skulls. Ancient power objects. In museums and private collections around the world are 13 crystal skulls said to be of Mesoamerican origin. They are the supposed relics of ancient power, and some believe they hold mystical powers. Legends say that each skull represents one of the 260 days in the Mesoamerican calendar, and that they were used for divination, healing, and other spiritual practices. But are they really ancient artifacts, or are they fakes? One of the most famous crystal skulls is the Mitchell-Hedges skull, named after the British journalist Sir Arthur Keith Mitchell-Hedges, who discovered it in 1924 at the ancient Maya site of Lamani in Belize. The skull was allegedly found in a crystal cavern beneath the temple of the High Priestess. Now, while the skull was supposedly discovered in an archaeological context, its exact provenance is murky. According to legend, the skull was actually discovered inside the hollow head of a stone statue, which itself was sitting atop the temple of the High Priestess. However, no written record or photographic evidence exists to support this tale. The Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. acquired the skull in 1943. However, they do not claim that it is ancient. In fact, the museum won't even go on record as saying where or how the skull was found. Today, the skull remains on display in the museum's Hall of Human Origins. but it is not actually part of the permanent collection. Instead, it is owned by an individual who has allowed the museum to display it on loan. Then we have the Yaxkin crystal skull, also known as the Maxaquarium crystal skull. Its origins, according to legend, can be traced back to the 18th century, when it was discovered by looters in a cave near the ancient Maya city of Uxmal. The skull changed hands several times before ending up with Swiss banker and collector in Maxaquarium in 1968, who then sold it to the Museo del Mundo in 1970. The skull is currently on display at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. The museum does not claim that the skull is ancient, though many visitors to the museum do. The skull of the ancient one, which resides at the British Museum, has a more modern provenance. It was reportedly found in 1970, near the Guatemalan village of Chuca. The skull was apparently discovered along with several other pre-Columbian artifacts by two American tourists, Sally de Madariga and her daughter Christina. When they returned to the States, they donated the skull to the Museum of Mankind in New York City. It made its way to the British Museum in 1994 and is now on display there. The museum doesn't claim the skull is ancient, though. Of course, one of the most famous crystal skulls is the one owned by Anna Hayes. This particular skull was given to her by her father when she was born. Her father had apparently found the skull on the island of Malta while serving in the British Royal Navy. The skull supposedly has a connection to the Knights Templar, a holy order of warriors founded in the 12th century by the Catholic Church to protect pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. However, no documentation exists to support this claim. There are 13 crystal skulls in total, with at least 9 of them residing in museums and private collections in the United States and Europe. The rest are in Mexico and Guatemala. But these mysterious artifacts may not be what they seem. Some experts believe that they were carved in the 19th century to capitalize on the growing interest in all things ancient. Anthropologist Philip Colenso argues that they are almost certainly modern fakes in his 2015 book, The Crystal Skulls. A Modern History, Collins argues that they were probably carved between the 1700s and the early 1900s in Europe and the United States. But if they are modern, why do some people swear that they possess strange powers? The answer might lie in the quartz itself. Quartz is piezoelectric, meaning that when pressure is applied to it, it generates an electrical charge. And it appears that this property of the quartz is what gives the skulls their supposed powers. Thanks for watching. Which crystal skull is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Start with number 8, Mohenjo-Daro, Ancient Nuclear Disaster. The Mohenjo-Daro was once a great city. It was the largest settlement in the world during the 3rd millennium BC, with a population larger than any other city at the time. Located in what is now Pakistan, this ancient metropolis was built around 2500 BC and boasted impressive feats of engineering and urban planning. The city was meticulously designed with a grid pattern of streets and buildings made of baked brick. There were advanced sewage systems, public baths, and even a university. The citizens of Mohenjo-Daro engaged in trade with other civilizations and are believed to have used a system of weights and measures that was incredibly advanced for their time. But how did such a sophisticated society just vanish? In 1922, the city's ruins were discovered by accident when a railway embankment collapsed. Subsequent excavations revealed a civilization far more advanced than anyone had anticipated. Archaeologists found evidence of a violent and sudden end to life here, with entire streets wiped out and people seemingly abandoned in the middle of their daily activities. In 2002, another shocking discovery was made. Scientists found extremely high levels of radiation while exploring the ancient city. They discovered that the radiation was coming from bricks found near the center of the city. Some of the bricks had to be removed from the site because they were emitting such high levels of radiation that it was dangerous for the archaeologists to stay near them. What could have caused such high levels of radiation? Some experts believe that a nuclear bomb exploded over the city, killing everyone instantly. This would explain why there was no gradual decline or evidence of the people migrating away from the city. One researcher said that it looked like everyone was wiped out in an instant. All the artifacts lying around are burnt, and there is evidence of a violent upheaval. It's entirely possible that a nuclear bomb could have ended this civilization. But what would have caused such a bomb to explode? Who would have possessed the technology to build a nuclear device 4,000 years ago? And where did the bomb go off? There are many theories about this. Some say the bomb went off outside the city walls during a military attack, perhaps from an invading army. Others say the bomb may have been dropped from a plane or a satellite, but none of these ideas make much sense. Why would an invading army need a nuke? And how would a plane or satellite technology exist thousands of years ago? Scientists have not come up with any definitive answers, but they do have a few ideas. Some researchers believe that the nuclear blast may have been caused by an extraterrestrial event, possibly a UFO. This would explain the sudden and violent end to the city and its people. But there is no concrete evidence to support this theory. Furthermore, if the bomb blast was caused by an extraterrestrial event, why was only one city destroyed? There are several other cities in the area that don't show any signs of nuclear damage. To make matters even more confusing, the level of radiation found in the city doesn't match the level of radiation that would be emitted from a nuclear bomb. This suggests that the radiation may not have come from a bomb at all, but from another source, such as radioactive waste or fallout from a nearby nuclear reactor that had malfunctioned. What we do know is that sometime after the disaster, the citizens fled the city and never returned. The advanced civilization that once thrived in Mohenjo-Daro was gone forever. Number 9. What's your opinion? Do you think a nuclear bomb destroyed the city of Mohenjo-Daro? Or do you think there was another cause for the sudden and mysterious end to the great city? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Before you go, I want to give a big shout out to 2 supporters for their contributions to the channel. Start with number 8, the Tomb of the Sunken Skulls, Sweden. In 2019, archaeologists made a gruesome discovery at Lakeholm in northern Sweden. In the shallow water near an old burial ground, they found several human skulls that had been mounted on stakes. They were discovered 40 feet underwater and had been deliberately placed there with the mouths of the skulls wide open, as if screaming into the afterlife. The skulls had come from 2 separate graves. One grave contained a man, woman, and child, while the second was only the remains of one man. All 4 individuals had been ritually sacrificed by having their heads smashed open with a stone axe or a wooden club. But what makes this site so unique is how the archaeologists found them. According to Swedish tradition, when a person died, their body would be placed in a boat and then pushed out into the middle of the lake to await their journey to the afterlife. Sometimes their boats were accompanied by animal sacrifices, which were likely meant to help guide the dead person's soul. But the remains of these people aren't just any ordinary ancient Swedes. These are some of the oldest human remains ever found in Sweden. Researchers say that the people who lived here at the time were part of the earliest known farming community in Northern Europe. This was around 8,000 years ago, not long after the last ice age ended and humans began to farm the land. These people also built some of the earliest known stone tombs in the region. They called these tombs the gallery grave because they have long corridors lined with standing stones. Some of the tombs even had false doors carved into them, suggesting that they were used for ritualistic purposes. Researchers believe that the people who built these tombs were trying to emulate the rising sun. And because they believed that their dead would rise again, they left offerings of food, weapons, and jewelry for them. But they must have also feared the dead returning with a vengeance, because they sometimes buried their dead with stones meant to weigh them down. They may have thought that the dead could do more harm to society if they did and have a heavy stone tied around their ankles. So instead of leaving their dead to rest, they shackled them and sank them to the bottom of the lake. Why were some of the dead treated differently? Why were some killed and then displayed on stakes in the lake? We don't know exactly what kind of religious beliefs the early farmers had, but researchers speculate that they worshipped a sun god. That would explain why they built tombs in the shape of a rising sun, and why they sometimes placed boulders on top of them. It could also explain why they practiced ritual sacrifice. The entire point of human sacrifice was to appease the gods, either to show them how devoted you are, or to keep them from destroying your village. And since they believed that the dead would come back to life, it makes sense that they wanted to give their sun god a front row seat. By placing the skulls on stakes in the lake, they may have been giving their sun god a place to watch over the living. Unfortunately, most of the remains were destroyed shortly after being discovered. Because no one was prepared for such a grim find, the team didn't have the proper equipment to lift the skulls out of the water carefully. And even worse, Visitors to the lake were soon stealing pieces of the skulls as souvenirs. Today, only 2 of the 4 skulls remain, and they're being kept at a museum in Umeå, Sweden. What do you think? Were these skulls really an offering to the sun god? Or was there another explanation? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Start with number 10, the Baghdad Battery. Ancient electricity. In 1936, an Iraqi museum curator unearthed a collection of clay pots near the ancient city of Baghdad. Inside one of them, he found a strange assortment of objects, including a copper pot, some iron nails, and a clay tablet. When put together, these mundane items form something quite extraordinary. A rudimentary battery capable of generating a small electrical current. It's known as the Baghdad Battery. And ever since its discovery, it sparked speculation about whether ancient Mesopotamian civilizations had somehow mastered electricity thousands of years before we did. But the story of the Baghdad Battery begins not in a dusty old archive, but in a Baghdad parking lot. It was December 1936, and the curator, Ahmed Hassan Zadeh, was overseeing excavations at the site of a former palace belonging to Saddam Hussein's cousin. There wasn't much to see there anymore except a few crumbling walls and a large collection of debris. But when Zadeh's team began sifting through the rubble, they started to find things. Dozens of clay jars buried beneath the floor of the palace. These weren't just ordinary storage vessels. Each jar was handmade with a screw-top lid. Intrigued, Zadeh took the jars back to the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad where he worked. One of them, however, turned out to contain nothing but dirt. And what was supposed to be a routine cataloging session soon became a detective story. As Zadeh cleaned out the jar, he uncovered an assortment of objects inside. There was a copper pot with a lid, several iron nails, and a clay tablet inscribed with cuneiform script. Together, these artifacts formed an odd set. It wasn't immediately clear why such disparate objects would be placed in the same container, especially since they were all sealed inside a waterproof clay jar. The team tried to piece together their possible use and eventually came up with a theory. When they put the copper pot inside the clay jar and connected the iron nails to its rim, they noticed that the nails began to rust. In other words, current was flowing from the copper pot to the nails. The nails acted like a battery's positive terminal, while the copper served as the negative terminal. The clay between them provided electrical insulation, and the liquid in the jar acted as the electrolyte, facilitating the transfer of electrons. All of this happened because of a natural process called electrolysis, which converts chemical energy into electrical energy. When exposed to an electrolyte, certain metals like iron release electrons, which then flow to another material, which in this case was copper. The iron oxidizes, or in other words, it rusts. The electrons continued to flow until the iron was completely transformed into iron oxide. In the case of the Baghdad Battery, the resulting current was weak, around 1 to 2 volts. That's enough to power a small lead, but nowhere near enough to run something like a motor. Still, that's pretty impressive for something that may have been created as early as the 2nd century BCE. Unfortunately, we can't know for sure how the ancient Mesopotamians made batteries like this one, nor do we know if they actually used them to generate electricity. For all we know, they could have been storing the components separately and only put them together. After they were discovered in the jar, perhaps they were placed there intentionally to ward off evil spirits, as some have suggested. What's more, archaeologists haven't uncovered any evidence of sophisticated electrical systems in ancient Mesopotamia. But what they do seem to have had was a knowledge of basic scientific principles, including the properties of different metals. By experimenting with electrolysis, they learned that a copper vessel placed inside a clay pot and filled with a liquid produced an effect they likely had unseen before, the mysterious glow of electric current. They may have even used the current to help identify unknown substances, kind of like how scientists test water's purity today by putting electrodes into it. But this is all speculation. The truth is, we don't know how advanced ancient Mesopotamian science really was, or if it was science at all. What we do know is that by experimenting with the world around them, ancient humans developed technologies that improved their lives. Whether or not they created the first battery, the next time you come across a mysterious jar in a parking lot, don't just throw it in the trash. You just might be throwing away history. So what should we talk about next? Please let us know in the comments. Start with number 11. This is the Dragon Man skull. It's one of the most important fossil discoveries in decades, and it could rewrite our history books. Let's delve into the shocking details surrounding this unearthed skull that has experts baffled. In February 2023, an archaeological team in China announced the discovery of a fossilized skull that estimated to be. The skull was unearthed from a cave in the Hubei province, which is located in the center of China. The site is known as the Dragon Man Cave, hence the name Dragon Man for the skull. It's not just any skull. This is no ordinary skull. It belonged to a person or a creature that lived during the late Pleistocene epoch. This was a period that saw the emergence of modern humans, Homo sapiens. But here's where things get really interesting. The Dragon Man skull doesn't quite look like our Homo sapiens ancestors. According to the researchers, the skull appears to represent a previously unknown species of human. They say that the individual whose skull was found may have walked upright on two legs like us, but they were likely covered in body hair and had a receding forehead, a large nose, and a protruding jaw. The skull itself is about 5 inches long and 2 inches wide. It also has a few extra holes near the back of the skull that are not present in Homo sapiens. These holes suggest that the individual had a strong, robust neck that supported a large head. Here's another mind-blowing fact. The researchers say that the Dragon Man walked the Earth around the same time as Neanderthals. If their dating is correct, that means this new species of human was around at the same time as some of our closest relatives, which raises a lot of questions about human evolution. We know that Homo sapiens originated in Africa and migrated to Europe and Asia, but the Dragon Man skull could shake up our understanding of this migration. You see, if the Dragon Man was a new species of human that lived alongside Homo sapiens, it could mean that there were other hominins living in China during this time period. It could also suggest that Homo sapiens migrated to China earlier than we thought. To understand this, let's take a quick journey through human evolution. As you may already know, humans did not just suddenly appear on the planet. We evolved over millions of years from earlier hominid species, such as Australopithecus afarensis, better known as Lucy. Homo habilis is considered to be the first true human species. They lived in Africa between 2.8 million and 1.6 million years ago. Then came Homo erectus, who were the first humans to migrate out of Africa. They were followed by the Neanderthals, who lived in Europe and parts of Asia until their extinction around 40,000 years ago. All of these species are part of the genus Homo. And then there's us, Homo sapiens, who emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago. We are the only surviving species of the genus Homo now. But the Dragon Man could change everything we know about human evolution. If he really is a new species of human, then we need to rewrite the textbooks. The discovery of the Dragon Man has been met with both excitement and skepticism from the scientific community. Some experts are thrilled at the prospect of a new human species, while others are more cautious. They're asking for more evidence before they accept the Dragon Man as a new species. One of the main reasons for the skepticism is that the skull was found without any other artifacts. There were no tools or other objects that could help date the skull or provide more information about the individual. The researchers say that they will continue to study the skull in hopes of learning more about the individual, such as their sex and age at death. They also hope to find more fossils that can shed light on this mysterious hominin. The Dragon Man may not be the first new species of human to be discovered. In recent years, several other species have been proposed, such as Homo naledi and Homo luzonensis. However, the Dragon Man is the first to have been found in China, and it's one of the most complete skulls ever discovered. As more research is conducted, we may learn that the Dragon Man was not a new species after all. Perhaps it was a Homo sapiens after all. But if that's the case, why does it look so different from us? Maybe it's because it's 146,000 years old. Maybe it's because it's 146,000 years old. Our understanding of human evolution is constantly changing as new discoveries are made. What we consider to be the norm today may be challenged tomorrow. The Dragon Man skull is a reminder of how much we still have to learn about our past, and it's a call for us to keep exploring and keep asking questions. Who knows what other secrets the past is hiding? And with that said, we thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more fascinating content. Till next time, stay curious. Start with number 12, the Lady of Dai, a perfectly preserved mummy, more than 2,000 years ago in China. A woman was buried with an astonishing secret. When her tomb was discovered in 1978, archaeologists were shocked at what they found. Her skin was still soft, her blood was still pumping through her veins, and her limbs were so flexible that she could have passed for a sleeping beauty. Who was this perfectly preserved woman, and how did she survive for so long? Let's take a closer look. Xin Jui was a 30 to 40-year-old woman who lived in the 3rd century BC. She was the wife of Li Chang, Marquis of Dai, a powerful nobleman in the early Han Dynasty. Historical records indicate that Marquis Li was a cruel and power-hungry ruler who kept a harem of women. At the time of his death, he had amassed so much power that he was practically a king in his own right. When he died, his wife Xin Jui took her own life, likely by drinking poison, and was buried with him in a huge tomb complex. Fast forward to 1978, when a group of farmers accidentally discovered the tomb. The entrance had been sealed for centuries, but somehow the local dogs managed to dig their way in. When the authorities arrived, they realized that they had stumbled upon something truly special. The tomb hadn't been robbed, and it was filled with all kinds of treasures, including 3,000 gold coins and more than 1,000 pieces of jade. But the real treasure was the perfectly preserved mummy of the Lady of Dai. Her coffin was made of silver, and inside it, she was wrapped in layers of gauze. Archaeologists carefully unwrapped the bandages to find a woman whose skin was still soft and supple. Her hair was neatly braided and tied with silk ribbons. Her fingernails and toenails were painted a delicate pink, and she even had a stylish tattoo on her ankle. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As the team continued to examine the mummy, they noticed that her chest was rising and falling. And when they felt for a pulse, they discovered that she had blood flowing through her veins. To make matters even more bizarre, her limbs were extremely flexible, and she had no visible bones or joints. It was like she was a living person who had merely fallen into a deep sleep. What kind of witchcraft is this? How can a woman who has been dead for 2,000 years still be alive? Well, it turns out that Xin Jui wasn't actually a witch at all. Her unusual state of preservation is due to a combination of factors. First, she was buried during the winter solstice, which may have slowed the decomposition process. Second, she was placed in a high-quality coffin that was made of silver and lined with mercury. Third, she was entombed with a variety of magical items, including talismans and amulets that were supposed to protect her body from harm. Finally, the fact that she was buried with her husband, who was a powerful member of the nobility, may have also played a role. After all, the royal family had access to the best resources and could afford to hire the most skilled craftsmen to build the most elaborate tombs. In the end, a combination of these factors created an environment that allowed Xin Jui's body to be preserved for thousands of years. Today, the Lady of Dai is one of the most famous mummies in the world. Her incredible story has captured the imagination of people all over the globe, and she continues to fascinate scientists and historians alike. What do you think about this mysterious mummy? Is there anything we missed? Let us know your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time. Start with number 13, the Sumerian King List. Rulers who lived for millennia. But this piece of writing does contain some very surprising claims. It's called the Sumerian King List, and it contains the names of kings who supposedly reigned for tens of thousands of years. Is this really possible? And if so, where are they? Are they still alive? Let's find out. This clay tablet was discovered in 1854 in the ancient Mesopotamian city of Shirpak, which is located in modern-day Iraq. It's now known as the oldest piece of writing ever found. On this tablet are 25 names of kings who supposedly ruled over the region from the distant past all the way up until 1800 BC. Now, this would be great evidence of a continuous civilization dating back thousands of years, except for one teeny tiny problem. The dates don't add up, according to this tablet. The first king of Shirpak, named Etana, who supposedly lived around 2600 BC, reigned for a whopping 19,500 years. His son, Aratin Nadim, supposedly lived for 36,000 years, and his grandson, or Amin, well, he beat them all by living for an incredible 43,200 years. After him, there's Belain, king of the 25th dynasty, who also lived for tens of thousands of years. In total, these kings supposedly ruled over Mesopotamia for 130,500 years. But this just isn't possible. So either these rulers really did live for tens of thousands of years, or the translation of the text is completely off, or maybe something else entirely. The reason why scholars couldn't agree on whether the text says 10,000 or 26,000 or 43,000 is because the symbols used in ancient Sumerian were largely pictographic in nature. So the same symbol could represent different quantities depending on what it was being used for. For example, the fish symbol could represent anything from one fish to many fish. And this same symbol was used to represent large numbers as well. Good example of this is the Great Pyramid of Giza, which according to mainstream archaeologists was built around 2550 B.C. The pyramid was constructed with limestone blocks, each weighing around 2.5 tons. And there are roughly 2 million of these blocks in the entire structure. Now, if we take the average length of a limestone block, which is around 2 meters, we can multiply that by 2 million to get the total volume of the pyramid. Now divide that total volume by the volume of one limestone block, and you get 2 million. But the ancient Egyptians didn't have any advanced measuring tools like calculators, let alone computers. So how did they manage to build such a precisely engineered structure? Or perhaps they didn't. Maybe the true number of blocks in the pyramid is closer to 10 million, making it significantly larger than what we think today, and more in line with other alternative theories about its construction. Now, while it's fun to speculate about alternate theories regarding ancient structures, it's important to remember that there's no actual evidence that the Great Pyramid had anything to do with these supposed 10,000-year rulers. But there may be another explanation for the Sumerian king list. Ancient Mesopotamia was located in what is today known as the Fertile Crescent, and it's believed that the people who lived here developed some of the earliest known systems of agriculture. With the advent of farming came the ability to store food, which led to population growth and the formation of settlements. As these settlements grew into cities, they needed a way to keep track of their history and the people who ruled over them. So they created written records, including the Sumerian king list. But what if the Sumerians weren't keeping track of years, but rather generations? If we assume that each king reigned for approximately 40 years, which is a reasonable estimate for the time period, we can adjust the dates accordingly. This would mean that the first king on the list, Etana, actually lived around 4000 BC instead of 2600 BC, and the last king on the list, Belaine, would have lived around 2400 BC instead of 1800 BC. This would also mean that there were likely many more kings who ruled between Etana and Belaine, kings whose names have been lost to history. So is there any truth to the Sumerian king list? Perhaps there's a grain of truth hidden somewhere in the text, but it's buried under a mountain of myth and legend. Whether these kings really lived for tens of thousands of years, or whether their reign was much shorter, one thing is for sure: their story has captured the imagination of people for centuries. And as long as there are people who are fascinated by ancient history, the legends of the Sumerian kings will continue to be told. Thanks for watching. What do you think? Did these kings really live for thousands of years? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. See you next time. Start with number 14, the Easter Island Moai. Walking giants. Mysterious ancient statues known as the Easter Island Moai continue to fascinate researchers today, more than 100 years after they were first discovered. Scattered across the remote Chilean island of Easter Island, the 887-pound stone figures are truly an archaeological marvel. But with no written history on the island and no surviving accounts from the people who built them, archaeologists have been left scratching their heads over many aspects of these statues, including how the heck they were moved. In this video, we'll explore the fascinating theory that the Easter Island statues somehow managed to walk across the island. Imagine, if you will, a massive stone head, nearly 10 feet tall, lumbering across the rugged landscape of Easter Island. While it may sound like something out of a fantasy novel or a crazy dream, some experts believe that this is exactly how the Moai were moved by the island's ancient inhabitants. Join us as we dive into the world of these enigmatic statues and uncover the surprising ways in which they may have come to life and walked across the island. As we know, the idea that the Moai walked on Easter Island might seem far-fetched. but it's actually rooted in the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the island's ancient builders. The Rapa Nui people had no metal tools, and yet they managed to carve over 800 of these statues out of solid rock. They then transported them across the island, sometimes over rough terrain, to their final resting places. One of the prevailing theories about how the Moi were moved is that they used an ingenious system of ropes to get them upright. This might sound crazy, but there is evidence to support this idea. In 2012, researchers from the University of Göttingen in Germany conducted a series of experiments to test this walking theory. They found that by using a sophisticated system of ropes and pulleys, it would have been possible for a group of people to lift and move a moai into an upright position. They even went as far as to create a replica moai and test it out. However, there are other theories about how the moai were moved. Some researchers believe that the statues were transported using wooden sleds or platforms. This would have been more labor-intensive and required more manpower, but it would have been less risky than trying to walk the statues. It's also possible that the moai were moved in a combination of ways, depending on the terrain and other factors. After all, the Rapa Nui people were resourceful, and it's likely they would have used whatever methods were necessary to get the job done. But what about the idea that the statues somehow walked on their own? This idea might seem far-fetched, but it's not entirely out of the question. Some researchers believe that the moai were placed in a specific orientation in order to harness the power of the wind. With this assistance, they could have rocked back and forth like a ship on the ocean, allowing them to walk across the island. This might sound like a long shot, but it's important to remember that the Rapa Nui people were incredibly skilled engineers and architects. They were able to create structures that were hundreds of years ahead of their time, such as the ceremonial village of Arango, which featured a massive stone platform with a staircase leading up to it. While the idea that the moai walked across Easter Island may never be proven, it's a fascinating theory that highlights the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the island's ancient builders, whether they used ropes, sleds, or some other method. The transportation of these massive statues is a remarkable feat of engineering. So what do you think? How do you think the Easter Island statues were moved? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching. Start with number 15. In today's video, we will travel to Bolivia to explore one of the most amazing places on Earth. Pumapunku, which has baffled scientists and researchers with its impossible stonework. These ruins are located in the Andes Mountains at an elevation of 13,000 feet above sea level. And despite their remote location, they have been an enigma to researchers for centuries. The stones at Pumapunku are some of the most precisely cut stones on the planet. Researchers have found that the average amount of daylight hours and temperature throughout the year at Pumapunku is always exactly 12 hours, no more, no less. Some believe that this is because the builders of Pumapunku knew about the Earth's axial tilt and how it affects the amount of sunlight we receive throughout the year. But what's even more incredible is that they achieved this with primitive tools. Or did they? There are two main theories behind the construction of Pumapunku. The first is that it was built by the Inca, who were known for their advanced stonework. However, the Inca Empire didn't reach its peak until around the 1400s, whereas Pumapunku is estimated to be over 15,000 years old. It's possible that the Inca simply reused the stones for their own purposes, but there's no evidence to support this theory. The other theory is that Pumapunku was built by an unknown advanced civilization that existed long before the Inca. This theory is based on the fact that the precision of the stones is so advanced that it would have required technology far beyond what was available at the time. For example, some of the stones weigh over 10 tons and they fit together so precisely that you QA and even fit a credit card between them. It's also interesting that many of the stones bear an uncanny resemblance to the Nazca lines, suggesting that they may have been created by the same people. So who could have built Pumapunku, and how did they do it? One theory is that the civilization had access to advanced technology, such as lasers and other tools we don't have today. Another theory is that they had help from extraterrestrials. In fact, some believe that the Nazca lines were created with the help of aliens, and that the builders of Pumapunku were able to reverse engineer the technology to create these massive stones. What is even more incredible is that there are several other megalithic sites in the area that are just as impressive as Pumapunku, such as Tiwanuku, which was likely the capital of this mysterious civilization.
However,
Mainstream archaeologists refuse to believe that any of these sites are evidence of an advanced civilization or alien contact. Instead, they believe that the stones were simply placed there naturally, and that any similarities between them is purely coincidental. However, there is evidence that suggests otherwise. For example, there are several megalithic sites in South America that share similarities with each other, such as Puma, Punku, Tiwanaku, Sacsayhuamano, and Arango. This suggests that they were all built by the same people using the same techniques. But what do you think? Could Puma Punku really be evidence of an ancient advanced civilization or even alien contact? Or are the stones simply a coincidence? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. With that said, let's move on to the next video. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out my podcast, where I discuss various topics related to ancient civilizations and other interesting subjects. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.